the independent country. It's a country where the liberties are secure. But there's always that danger of saying, you know what, we got all these people over here who are pushing in this particular direction and going groupthink. And so that's our challenge to us as conservatives, is to say, you know what, I think you're moving in the right direction here, but you know, there are a lot of people here who have been in this party and have been working hard for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're being pushed out the door. And it's bully tactics. And we don't do that in the Republican. We don't do that in the Conservative Party. And some Ron Paulers think that's kind of cute. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to putting the signs out there, and when it comes to late nights in the campaign central, you got to be able to do that. You got to be willing to do that, to be part of this process in order to make sure that the conservative values are pushed forward. That those are the ones that guarantee our liberties and our freedoms. Not following after an individual. That is not America. America is about ideals, not individuals.
To say as well that I've had people walk up to me now, and because we're trying to politicize the Ron Paul movement to win a race, and that's very dangerous. And I've had people say, well, you're a Ron Paul Republican, or you're a Ronald Reagan Republican, or I'm a Kurt Bills Republican. We're all different. We're all individuals. It's interesting that we sit up and we talk about the individual nature of America, and then we try to hang a moniker on our opponent. Isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that we say we're against politics as usual, but then we do the politics as usual thing and hang those three things? Did you hear it? Isolationism. Did I mention isolationism? No. International trade, carrying our freedom and liberty forward, is the greatest hope for this planet, because we are the greatest country because of our liberty. We talk about the Israel thing. I'm the best friend of Israel because I say Israel is its own sovereign country and can do what it wants to. And we're there for them, and we're friends with them through trade. And we'll be there for them if they were attacked. I would be anyway. And then the gold standard. I never mentioned the gold standard. I talked about the dual mandate, but yet we do the politics as usual. And we run to Washington, D.C. for money. And then we say we're gonna be an outsider, we're gonna be an independent. You know, we're gonna be the strong voice that goes forward. I think bringing, again, addition and multiplication is better than subtraction and division. This is a moment. Why are there 34 and growing? Next week you'll see how it's growing. Why are there 34 legislators? That gold bill that was brought up, one other person signed on it with me the first time I dropped it. The next time there were 4. Those ideas of sound money are growing. The 34 legislators who signed up right away, they were Romney supporters, Santorum supporters, Bachmann supporters, Pawlenty supporters.
I was serious.
Maybe a little more negotiating or whatever, however you want to term it, but we need to reach out and bring a lot of people in. With that said, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy in that statement, mainly because we have a $12 million issue that we haven't reached out to. And that $12 million issue is the Racino issue, okay? The Indians fund 12 million. Matter of fact, Emmer told me that it's twice that amount, okay? But let's just say it's only $12 million. Now, they give $12 million to perpetuate the exclusivity of the casinos, okay? That's $12 million that we have to overcome because our party, and some would say there's some corruptness in that issue, okay? Because we turn around and say, well, we can't have it because it's not in our platform. They use it as an excuse. My point is, it's maybe not a federal issue, but it's an issue that affects you, $12 million worth of funding. And that funding isn't limited to the state Racino issue. That $12 million is going to be taken right into Klobuchar's pocket, Franken's pocket, and every other pocket. In the meantime, we've got Dave Thompson saying that we need to reach out and have some collective groups that are going to come in under the tent to solve these issues. How do you, and let me say this, do you support the Republican Party issue platform to eliminate the barriers of the Racino? Emmer ran on the issue of saying that he couldn't support it. well, hindsight, we all know the Sutton stories and all the, maybe some suggested the corruption in that issue. And how did you stand on that issue?
All right, thank you.
I was in the legislature when we had the Racino bill in 2006, I'm sorry, it was earlier. I think it was my first session actually, and I was queried, would I support gambling? My stand was, I don't support gambling, I think it's an ill. Unfortunately, Governor Perpich gave us gambling, gave the gambling entitlement to the tribes in perpetuity. There's no review. When you have other states who are looking at this, they actually put a deadline on it and for review. So we've got it. Now the question is, how do we deal with it? And so when we did pass that bill out of the legislature and it went to the governor's desk for negotiations, the Senate was DFL controlled, and we were trying to negotiate just to get them to open their books so we could figure out how much they were making. They wouldn't do it. They pushed themselves away from the table. They said, Governor, we're going to wait you out and then we're going to take you out. And so they did. They spent, well, they didn't quite take him out. He won by 40,000 votes. But the bottom line was they spent a ton of money. The only way that we get some type of balance in this process is to have some competitive gambling. Now, I'm not a big gambling kind of guy. I think it's an ill, but my answer to that was, let's eliminate all gambling across the state. Unfortunately, it's like an addiction, and you're not going to get rid of it. So I think in order for us to actually negotiate and to actually bring some regulation to the gambling in Minnesota, and folks, gambling is increasing. It's increasing by at least 1,000 slots a year through the tribes, and it's unregulated. And in order to have some type of negotiations in there, we need to have some competition, and I would support Racino. I did support Racino at that time.
The question is, do you support changing the platform so that somebody like Emmer could have said, hey, I support Racino? That's why, a lot of people believe that that's why he lost the election on that issue.
But there were a lot of reasons he lost the election.
We can't rehash 2010 now.
Yeah.
So the question, it was in there somewhere, do you support
Racino,
putting Racino in the state party platform?
To at least allow somebody like Emmer to be able to say, I can support the Racino. He used that as an excuse.
Yeah.
well,
Kurt.
do you want to?
Well, yes.
Okay, Kurt?
And I'm a yes too. I think individuals are individuals, and I went forward. I put my name on the Racino bill to pay the school shift back, to do whatever we could to break that monopoly. And that's really where it comes down to here, is if you're really for a free market, if you're really for free enterprise, I will, as your U.S. Senator, go to D.C. and absolutely wage war against monopoly. Monopolies that come from the corporate world, monopolies that come from the union world. It's almost like we're living in the 1750s again, with Adam Smith writing his books about these monopolists that rise up and seek the parliament or the king out to get their monopoly favors. That's the economy that we're living in today, and that's the economy that we have to stop. So we have to go to Washington and fight this market failure that is seeking monopoly instead of seeking competition. And that's definitely one of our monopolies in this state that we can't get rid of now. It's absolutely terrible. And it is funding the left. If you do the research, it's completely funding the left. So they have the tribes, and they also have an organization that I have to pay dues to, Education Minnesota. And Education Minnesota is the 600-pound gorilla. It comes into a room and it sits wherever it wants to.
Time.
And that's why I'm a right-to-work guy.
I'm a yes as well, but this is definitely a state issue, and in this particular race, we're running at the federal level, and I think the state should have the ability to incentivize that kind of competition. Just like at the federal level, you've got to incentivize competition. You've got to ensure that the light of the free markets is inserted into every single process, and that's one of the worst things about the Obama administration and its agenda is they try to pick winners and losers. You look at energy, you look at a lot of different aspects. They're stepping up, they've got their thumb on the scale and saying they've got a preference based on the way the government sees it or who their friends are. And that's the kind of crony capitalism that we've been exposed to for years. And we need to stand up against that and say, this is about free markets. This is about individual responsibility. This is about limited government and individual, and a fly in front of my face, This is about all the big things that matter in our country, the things we believe in, the core things we believe in as conservatives and as Republicans, that when the government comes in, the dependency culture is created, and more winners and losers are chosen from the top in a command economy type of structure, which means less jobs, which means less liberty, and more taxation and more government. So we've got to continue to push back against government and picking winners and losers at any time.
All right, we're going to go to the rapid fire round. 30 seconds for the answer now in the interest of time, starting with Kurt. You're next.
First of all, thank you for coming to Inver Heights. I appreciate you taking time tonight. I didn't know I was going to be up here asking this question, so bear with me. How will you argue against the liberals regarding the Constitution being an archaic document, or as it should be, like they say, it's a living document?
No, we need, this is called public choice theory economics. We need, institutions are our answer. We have institutional problems that have been created in our bureaucratic growth entitlements. The only answer is an institutional answer, the Constitution. That's how you make this argument. Again, it's back to core economic principle that politicians gravitate towards decision. They're people. They gravitate towards individual choices. You have to prevent them from doing that, and we knew that at our founding. We have to prevent them from doing that by writing the Constitution.
30 seconds, Pete.
I think it's defending what the founders knew, that the existence of government was to defend the life, liberty, and happiness of individuals. It isn't government that bestows those rights and those opportunities. It is God, and it's the government's ability to protect them and limit the government's influence. And the Constitution is central to that. That truth does not change. Dan's got his Constitution, I've got mine in my pocket as well, and that's the kind of thing we need to be checking back and looking at, because the founders understood human nature and the role of government.
All right, Dan, 30 seconds.
Would you ask that question? I love his answer. I'm just trying to remember what the question was.
How will you argue against the liberals regarding the Constitution being an archaic document, or as they say, it should be a living document?
Well, you know, there's a fundamental disconnect with the liberals because they believe that government is their God. And most Americans believe that God gave us these rights and government is set there and they're trying to take it away. And that's the argument here, is that these are unalienable rights. These are rights that belong to you and me. And government has no right to infringe upon us. That's why the Constitution was written. That's why it gives the guidelines. And for us to engage with the Democrats, and I did this for 8 years on the Minnesota House floor, their ideals are much different than ours. We just have to accept that and try and recruit to our cause.
All right.
Lawmakers and policymakers meeting behind closed doors for the future interests of this country. That's a clear violation of the Logan Act, as well as members within the CFR, Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg groups, and all these other things. Do you guys feel that anybody meeting behind these closed doors and these secretive groups should be held for treason?
Pete, I wouldn't support a single thing that moves toward a new world order or one world government or anything, and I don't think anyone in our government should be party to or assisting in anything that leads us toward one world government or that kind of influence. So I think we need to make sure that American interests are always put up front, always defended. It's what I fought for overseas. It's why I raised my right hand as a soldier to deploy 3 times, because America is a special place. And international organizations don't care about our interests and our sovereignty. We need to stand up at it every turn.
Dan, 30 seconds.
I believe the beauty of America's government is that it was always meant to be open and transparent to the people. Obama promised he was going to do that, did exactly the opposite. We need to ensure that when people in government are beginning to shadow, that they are held accountable in that process, and that they are prosecuted in that process. That's one of the major disconnects we have with our government and the trust in government today, is that people hear the government is supposed to do something and then they don't do it.
Build that transparency here, and also with our relationships with foreign countries. I think some of the problems we're getting into now are that we're into bailout funds that are worldwide, that we're being financially leveraged by institutions that don't have our interests at heart. And we need those things exposed. Light needs to be shed on those activities. You're absolutely right.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right,
Question. So it's going to take millions of dollars to beat Amy, and money talks. But our principles matter as well, and actions speak louder than words. How are you going to handle people that are trying to influence and seek your influence and contribute to you, such as executives from institutions and banks too big to fail, giving you contributions? Have you accepted donations from one such as Goldman Sachs?
Dan?
Yeah, I think I'm up. Yeah, let me just say, when I had someone who, in my first campaign, gave me $200, and then when I went against what they wanted to do, was a hospital moratorium, they wrote back and they said, I can't believe you did that, we gave you that money. I sent the money back. And that's the same principle, is that you are beholden to no one except the voters, the peoples that you represent. And I think if there are large corporations that are investing in, that needs to be transparent, and that needs to be put out in and it will be in the FEC.
Currently, we have so many small donors, that's not an issue, so, but when it does come down to that, I will not, I told you I'd fight against monopolies, and if I think one of these firms is a monopoly, there is no way that they will, that they'll get their hands on me. I think you need to fight against that. I think taking money from these banks that are too big to fail, and then saying that you're going to go fight against them, it would be an absolute travesty.
I think the number one thing you have to do as a legislator is be fiercely independent and willing to stand up for that at every moment, and have the courage if you're convicted. So I've gone into the belly of the beast, Princeton, because I earned my way there and worked my tail off. To Harvard, because I earned my way there and worked my tail off. I went to the streets of Iraq and Afghanistan. No one's going to scare me. I'm beholden to no one. And I have got 2 checks from Goldman Sachs, one of which was my college roommate, and the other one's also another one I went to college with. So if friends of mine want to donate to my campaign, I'm happy to have their donations.
All right, the best question of the night. We're starting with Kurt. Social Security is on a bankruptcy course. How will you fix it? 30 seconds.
Yeah, what's great is that the platform to Revitalize America already looks at this, raising that Social Security age, which hasn't changed for decades and decades. And then also, one thing from the Ryan plan that I'd like to take is the privatizing of those accounts for young people, giving them that option. And then you have to means test this entitlement in order to make it solvent.
Can you say the question one more time? Sorry.
Social Security is on a bankruptcy course. How will you fix it?
Absolutely. You've got to look at a lot of things Kurt just said. You've got to look at means testing. You've got to look at the retirement age and increasing that, but making sure you're saving it for current generations. And then the kinds of basic accounts that people can opt into. That's one thing President Bush tried in 2004 and he was demagogued for. A 4% opt-in opportunity to invest your own money. Those are the types of things we need to be willing to look at and defend against easy political attacks that the left will bring.
All right, Dan.
Those are the solutions. You've got to raise the retirement age. It was instituted in the FDR years, and it hasn't been changed since. You're going to have to raise those, do the means testing. And then you're also, I think, for the youth, younger people who are below 55, as it was put in the Ryan plan, basically allow them to make their own investments, be on the side to have an alternative to the Social Security system.
All right. This one is a 2-word answer. 2 words. That's it. 1, do you think the Minnesota marriage amendment will pass? And 2, is marriage a federal issue for you as a U.S. Senator? 2 words. Will the marriage amendment pass? And
Yes.
Is it a federal issue? Starting with Pete.
Yes and no.
Dan?
Yes and no.
Kurt?
Yes, no.
Good answers. Dan?
Well, I'm going to go back to foreign policy because I believe that you're all probably solid on economic issues. And I did talk to Pete earlier this week, so he's going to get a second bite at this question. But I will really fast. So the women of Afghanistan stood up and took leadership roles because we asked them to. And now they're under real danger of being poisoned, tortured. And just the other day, young women were tortured who are trying just to get an education. So as a U.S. Senator, if I wasn't Jennifer DeJordan and I was an Afghan woman, what would you tell her about what we'll do to help them ensure their safety as we depart their country? So what would you say to the women of Afghanistan as a U.S. Senator if you were elected?
Well, we're not going to fix it. They're going to have to fix it from within. And I think that that interaction has got to be, we give them some tools with which to work, and we give them some ideals, and then we say, you know what, if push comes to shove, we're going to have to come collectively and seek asylum in an embassy. And I think that's, you know, that's a great question. I've not had to deal with that one before, but we cannot go in and try and fix a culture, particularly the onerous things that are put on the women in a Islamic culture. That's not going to, we're not going to be able to do that.
Kurt?
Yeah, you have to have confidence and certainty that our military personnel and can create a system that can sustain their safety after we're gone. That's where you have to put your faith in. That said, there are places across the world, Liberia this last week, whether it's in Somalia, there are places where so many tragedies are taking place. It's like Doc said, it's a very difficult topic.
All right, time.
It's a very complex issue, but you don't do it by telling them when you're going to leave. That's the worst things about what Obama did. He surged, and then he told the enemy when he was going to leave at the same time by setting a deadline. And when you tell women or men or children when you're going to leave, then the enemy has the opportunity to seize that aid. That's naive foreign policy. Foreign policy is something I understand in depth and have been studying for years. This is something I can bring to the table as a U.S. Senator, asking those kinds of questions. What are the ramifications of that kind of policy?
All right, thanks, James.
In terms of this campaign and the strategy of addressing issues, what is your strategy for managing how you address each issue? Because I think that while the economy is most important in people's minds, if you go too far down that route, you're going to turn people off, especially, perhaps moderates and with the Ron Paul slant. So what is your strategy in terms of, making sure you provide balance to that and showing that you're a complete Republican candidate?
Kurt? Yeah, it's to go around the state, not only, and you have to talk about the economy. A poll just came out with women, and women are such an important voting bloc, and their top 3 things that they're concerned about are jobs, the economy, and the national debt. I can't see how you'd want to get outside of that other than geographically going around the state, and whether you're on a college campus talking about SOPA and PIPA, which Amy Klobuchar co-sponsored, or heading into the farm country. We've already been talking to people out towards Moorhead and talking about dust regulations and not letting 14-year-olds drive tractors. That you got to take it to them where they've been hit hardest, and you have to do that very geographically.
You only have 35 seconds.
I think you have to show them that there is a core of how you will make these decisions beyond your own personal beliefs. And that is my first litmus test on any bill is this bill constitutional? Does it fit? Is it included in something is the proper role of the federal government? And we need to make sure as we look at each thing, we're looking at the core of what we believe as a nation, what our founders believe, what they put in that document, and whether it fits the bill. Because nobody on this table has an economics degree, and we need to be looking at the idea in the Constitution that it's the founders there that understood our money system, that understood the fact that these bills need to be limited in how they affect the people.
Dan, 35 seconds.
Yep, the campaign trail is very dynamic, and there needs to be a central theme, and basically that central theme is going to be Amy is not working for the people of Minnesota. She's extreme. She's out of the net, but then there's going to be things that are going to pop up along the way, and you need to have a good staff that is versed in that process. One person cannot be smart enough to cover all those issues. So you got to surround yourself with people who know and who can advise you the correct method, and then you've got to be able to respond immediately. Not take 2 days, not take 48 hours. You got to do it right away, and so you got to capitalize on the moment. That's a good campaign.
All right, thank you. Last.
With the problem that we've got with our veterans coming back home from our foreign policy errors, I call it, they're coming back to a depressed economy with pressures to provide for their family. Is there anything that, as a senator, that you would do specifically to help the veterans and help, get them back and to be able to be a productive workforce?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for your service and what you've done. And I think I have been uniquely positioned to talk about the wounds of these wars, that some are seen and many are unseen, and that we need an advocate in Washington who can talk about the conflicts and talk about the wounds they've been inflicted, and then empower these veterans to go back and be leaders in their community. What they've trained and what they've done, regardless of the mission, has empowered that and created a situation where they can go forth and be future leaders. We need to look at ways that we can empower them through education, through job training, and making sure that they're coming back and set up to succeed.
I was able to, when I was in the Minnesota House of Representatives, I actually turned the state around, and part of what the process was doing for our veterans, making sure that when they were over there, they had a website that actually began to open up the job opportunities for them. But even more importantly, it's at the federal level. There are Title VIII contracts that are done by the federal government that should be opened up to our veterans. Veterans first, veteran-owned businesses first, veterans first, that should be allowed to fill those jobs first before the other population is. They've served, they need to be taken care of. Thank you.
Yep, thank you for the question. A couple of other bills that I've also had at the State House are the Veterans Hiring Tax Credit, which mimic the federal credit. Since we don't have a simplified tax code, we have to be able to work within it and do those things. Also a small business hiring credit that I have sponsored last year. The Vets Hiring Credit is actually in the tax bill this year. And then my first meeting was with the Red Bulls, right down in Rosemount. They're based out of my district, my house district down there. And how can we help you working with the Beyond the Yellow Ribbon with various organizations. So.
Thank you.
For coming out tonight, and I think this was a great opportunity to have a discussion. You can kind of see we got some great candidates up here, but I'll tell you what, I spent 22 years in the military in leadership positions. And I had a great time in the military, but it didn't just stop there. I moved into the private sector, worked in a startup company, planted a patent as an inventor, got into the legislature, became a leader in the legislature. I was a minority whip. When we actually held the line, we had 3-vote margin, and I put people went into their office and said, you know what, if you go bipartisan on this, I want to know right now. And so we put the constraints on our caucus when the Democrats came in and said, we got 3 names that are going to jump ship on you. I said, no you don't, because I'm the whip and I know. And so we were able to hold back that process of them trying to override the governor, and in that process hold back $3.2 billion, drive the state budget down to 30.8 from 32.5. So we actually reduced the budget. I have feet on the ground reforms that I have done in the military and in the legislative session. That's my goal, is to go to Washington and reform the way Washington does business. And that means kicking over some rocks. That means standing by the things that were given to us in the Constitution and saying, you know what, this is my authority for coming to Washington, D.C. This is my authority as a citizen to say, you guys who are capitalizing on the taxpayer dollar, on the dole that has been put before you, are now stopping, because I'm going to be a voice for reform in Washington, D.C. My goal is to represent every individual that pays taxes, that has a vested interest in the freedoms and making sure those freedoms are passed down to their children. I will be your voice in Washington, D.C. I have a proven performance, and I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you very much for being here. And I'm running because America is the greatest country the world has ever known. But every generation has to step up and fight for it. I mean, tonight, as we speak right here, there's a kid playing in a foxhole in Afghanistan defending our freedom to do just this. We have that responsibility right now to build a better process, to fight for our country here, and don't ever cede an inch. Fight inch by inch against the incrementalism of the choice that we face. We face another side right now that believes in more government and more debt and more regulations and less liberties for all of us. And we have that choice. Ronald Reagan talked about a time for choosing. Our choice is limited government, individual responsibility, the free enterprise system, and how do we unleash it, and a return to the Constitution, and a strong national defense that lays in a foxhole at night to defend what we have. We have to remember that at every turn. We know as conservatives that politicians don't create jobs, small business owners do, and we're going to talk about that. And creating the environment for those businesses to succeed and for jobs to be created and this economy to come back. Because jobs in the economy will be central to this election. And we've got to talk about it in ways that relate to Minnesotans. We know that our debt and deficit spending is unsustainable. And that kitchen table economics tells us we can't spend up the credit cards and then hand it to our kids and say, you've got the bill, you pay it next. That's irresponsible, and that's not the kind of thing we do. We know that our Constitution limits the role of the federal government, and we need to live within those limits and be willing to courageously talk about it. And we know that the peace that we have in this country comes through strength. It comes because we know that America is a safer place when we have a strong military, and we must never and can never afford to cede our sovereignty to international organizations like the UN or the International Criminal Court. These are the things I believe. This is the choice we face. We need to elect a candidate and choose a candidate who's able to move a message, build an organization, and raise the money to tell Minnesotans what's at stake and inspire them to get involved and vote on Election Day for what we believe in.
Those economic messages are the reason why I'm running. I've answered so many questions over the last 15 years that it led me to run in 2008. Mr. Bills, what are we supposed to do about this, was the question that led me down this path. I will not stop until I reach my goal, and that is giving voice to future generations. I wear the little feet on my lapel not only because I'm pro-life, but because of all the kids that are to come, the decisions that are being made that are putting burdens on them. I ran for city council, I helped pay down debt and start a youth commission. I beat an incumbent DFLer by 15 points to go take a $6.2 billion deficit into a $1.2 billion surplus. This election is about the economy, and you need an economics teacher, just a little old economics teacher from Winona State University, an in-state school, to go and teach people about what the economy has done to them, what it's done to me as a small business owner. That's what we need to walk around with. That legitimacy as a small business owner and a high school teacher, you'll get into houses across this state. You got that common man approach from a union member who can go out and talk about the free enterprise system. I'm fighting for my very existence as an econ teacher because my class revolves around economic freedom, incentives, competition, voluntary exchange, and private property. If I don't go fight now, I'll be teaching history because we won't have a free economy anymore. We need institutional solutions that come from the Constitution to solve our institutional problems. I'm Kurt Bills. If you're a delegate or alternate, I'm asking for your vote at the state convention. If you're not, give me your vote in November. Thanks for coming out tonight.